Hello and welcome to your daily news summary for UPSC preparation. It's November 18th, 2025, and we have a lot to cover. Let's jump right into the headlines that are going to be crucial for your exams. So, we've got three huge stories driving the news today. We're talking major developments in foreign policy, a really strong statement on national security, and a landmark decision on constitutional law. We're going to unpack all of these and a whole lot more. Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down for you. First, we'll look at India on the world stage. Then we'll check the economic pulse. After that, it's governance and judicial watch, followed by the environment in the spotlight. And we'll wrap things up with national security and society. Right, first up, India on the world stage. There are a few key things happening right now that are really putting New Delhi's diplomatic skills to the test. This is a massive development, and it creates a really immediate and, honestly, a very complex challenge for India. With former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in India, Dhaka's formal extradition request puts New Delhi in an incredibly difficult position. How do you balance your treaty obligations with the extremely sensitive political reality of the region? It's a tough one. And here we see India's classic strategic balancing act in full swing. On one hand, you've got this bipartisan push from the US to really double down on the relationship, focusing on things like the Quad. But on the other hand, preparations are in high gear for the annual summit with Russia's President Putin, which just goes to show how that long-standing partnership is still very much a priority. We're also seeing a pretty sudden policy change coming out of Iran. They've suspended the visa waiver facility for Indians. They're citing criminal misuse, and this move, well, it's a bit of a setback that could definitely impact travel, business, and just the general goodwill between the two countries. Okay, let's move on to our second section. It's time to check the economic pulse and focus on some key data and policy shifts we saw today. The latest trade data, well, it tells a pretty challenging story. Exports actually dipped in October, but the real headline is the major surge in imports. Because of that, the trade deficit has just ballooned to over $41 billion. That widening gap, it puts a lot of pressure on the currency, and it's for sure a top concern for economic policymakers right now. So what's happening on the domestic policy front? Two things really stand out. First, the government is giving a boost to the print media industry by hiking ad rates by 26%. And at the same time, it's planning a whole new law and a regulatory body to crack down on job scams, which, as we know, is a huge issue for so many people looking for work. Now, let's turn our attention to some critical developments in polity, governance, and what's happening in our judiciary. Wow, the Supreme Court has taken a very firm stance here. It issued a direct warning to the Maharashtra government, basically reaffirming that 50% ceiling on reservations from the famous Indra Sanwi case. The court even threatened to stay the local elections if this cap is breached. That's a powerful reassertion of a major constitutional principle. Okay, before we would jump to the next update, it's really important you understand this term, a D voter, which stands for doubtful voter. This is a very specific category in Assam for individuals whose citizenship is being contested, and their final status isn't decided by election officials, but by these special bodies called foreigners' tribunals. So, with that definition in mind, the Election Commission has now ordered that D voters in Assam will stay on the electoral rolls until their cases are completely settled by a tribunal. In other news, SP leader Azam Khan and his son have been sentenced to 7 years in jail. And in Delhi, the city government is moving to provide electricity to thousands of properties that were previously flagged for illegal construction. Let's shift our focus now to the environment. This is a topic that's constantly in the news, super crucial for your exams, and today we're seeing multiple pressure points emerge. That number, 359, it tells a really grim story for Delhi today. The city's air quality is back in the very poor zone, and it's forecasted to get even worse, back to severe. You combine that with the dropping temperatures, and you have a serious public health challenge for millions of people. And it's not just the air. The pollution in the Yamuna is so visible with the return of this thick, toxic-looking froth. It has, maybe unsurprisingly, reignited a political blame game between the AP and the BJP. This image has become a really potent symbol of the failure to clean up one of India's most vital rivers. It's interesting. The Supreme Court seems to be performing a bit of a balancing act here on environmental issues. It's taking a hard line on conservation, mandating these eco-sensitive zones and banning night tourism in tiger habitats. But it's also making a point to acknowledge the human cost, cautioning that these rules can't unfairly hurt the livelihoods of daily wage workers. In our final section now, we're going to look at some important national security matters and some of the key social shifts that are shaping the nation. That is a direct and incredibly powerful message. By calling a recent military operation just a trailer, the Army chief is signaling a zero-tolerance policy. He's making it clear that the response to any state-sponsored terrorism from across the border will be absolutely overwhelming. Okay, shifting from hard power to soft power, because this number is hugely significant. We're talking over 363,000 students, which is almost a 10% jump from last year. This solidifies India's position as the #1 country of origin for international students in the United States. And this trend becomes even more stark when you compare it with China. While the number of students from India is surging upwards, the number from China has actually declined. It's a really significant shift in global education and, frankly, migration patterns. And just to round out our updates today, the political dialogue in Ladakh is moving forward, with representative bodies formally submitting their demands for statehood and special status. And meanwhile, the aviation sector has taken a really unified and firm stand against unruly passenger behavior, putting that Army officer from the Srinagar incident on a collective no-fly list. So, as we wrap up, all of today's headlines really leave us with this one central question, don't they? How does a modern state balance these huge competing pressures? How do you uphold constitutional law, tackle an environmental crisis, and maintain national security all at the very same time? This is really the core challenge of governance. And that's the key takeaway for you. None of these issues exist in a vacuum. A polluted river isn't just an environmental problem, it's an economic problem, a social one. A security threat doesn't just involve the military, it impacts investment and stability. Your preparation is going to be its strongest when you can see all of these connections. Thanks so much for joining this explainer.